Welcome back to the Forward Operations Devlog series, where I pause development every 90 days to catalog my latest progress and challenges. This is the 8th video in the series, which means it's the 2-year anniversary of working on Forward Ops in my free time, which is kind of insane. Can't believe I've been regularly building and delivering these videos right on schedule. That said, it's a good time to reflect and figure out what's next and what direction I want to take this channel in, but more on that at the end. This sprint was all about making the soldiers in the game more reactive to the world around them. At least that was the goal. I spent July and August enjoying the summer weather, so that left me with only about 3 weeks in September to get any real work done. And then Silksong came out. Despite all this, I've somehow managed to get the soldiers ducking behind cover and responding to the danger they feel from enemies in just a few days worth of development time. Alright, enough with the introduction. Hi there, I'm Jarrett, and this is my hobbyist game dev channel, Damage Algebra. Let's get into it. So let's start with working with cover. As of the end of last sprint, I can move the soldiers as a unit anywhere on the map that I wanted to, but regardless of where I put them or what I put them in front of, they just kind of stand there. That's not ideal. What we really want is for the soldier to stand behind tall cover, crouch behind low cover, and go prone if they have no cover. First things first, I needed a way to store the pawn's pose, or what I ended up calling stance. Since I use a composable data structure, this just means adding a data component to the pawn's entity to manage this value. I actually already had a stance data component from way back when I implemented picking things up, so I just added crouching and prone to the list of options. Okay, now I can store the stance type, but changing the value doesn't actually do anything. Next, I needed to update the controls pawn animation component. Thankfully, it already listens to the stance component for changes in the stance type. The problem is that it just doesn't know what to do for crouch and prone. To fix this, I just needed to add cases for each of the new stance types. Actually, I had to do this 4 times because there's different animations for when the pawn is idle, when the pawn is idle while holding a rifle, when the pawn is moving, and when the pawn is moving while holding a rifle. This code is gross, but it works. And just like that, we can have our pawns change stance. We can even make them do burpees. Now that we can make the pawns change stance, we need them to do so when they sense cover is near. This, of course, requires us to probe the environment around the pawn to determine if there is any cover around them. Like with stances, I needed a place to store data, so I created a new data component from my pawn entities to keep track of where they have immediate cover. To keep things somewhat simple, I'm checking exactly 8 directions around the pawn, and I've used compass directions to keep them straight. At first, I wanted to use a Boolean value for whether or not there was cover in that direction, but the height of the cover matters. So instead, I'm storing how tall the cover is. With the data structure in place, it was time to write a script to update the information. I created a new behavior called seeksCover that will check what kind of cover is around the pawn. First, it looks north, which is the direction the pawn is facing, and does a line cast about a ½ meter off the ground and 1.5 meters outward. If the line cast hits something, we know we have cover to at least the knees, so we repeat the line cast a ½ meter higher to see if the cover comes up to the waist. If it does, we continue going higher to check shoulder height and finally the pawn's full height. If at any point we don't find an obstacle as we move higher, we stop looking and use the last value we found as the cover height. Once it's done with the forward or north direction, it repeats for the other 7 compass directions. I wouldn't say this is a great design. That's a lot of line casts to make for each pawn, even if it's only about once per second. I was on a tight deadline though, so it is what it is. With the cover data updating dynamically, and the animation behavior listening for changes on the stance data, I just needed to add one more final piece, updating stance depending on the cover data. This proved to be fairly simple. In a new behavior called changes stance, I check every tick to see what the highest level of cover is to the north, northeast, and northwest of the pawn. Put another way, what's the highest bit of cover that's directly or roughly in front of them? If there is no cover, then change the stance to prone. If the cover comes up to the knees, then crouch behind it. Otherwise, the pawn needs to stand or it won't be able to see over the cover. Here you can see me experimenting once the final glue is in place. As the box moves down, the pawn will crouch down to take advantage of the cover. When the box is too low to provide any cover, the pawn hits the deck. As the cover rises, the pawn will stand up in order to be behind cover, but also to see over it. It's a small little bit of environmental awareness, but it makes the soldiers feel so much more alive. The best part is that it doesn't matter if the pawns are stationary or moving. If there is cover roughly in front of them, they'll react to it. So this is where I should have stopped, given my tight deadline, but while ducking behind cover is all well and good, what should pawns out in the open do? Should they really go prone all the time if they're not immediately next to cover? Probably not. It depends on how threatened they are, right? It was time to add the concept of danger to the game. Danger is a numerical score from 0 to 100 that represents how concerned a pawn is about the threats around them. I drove myself crazy for a whole day trying to come up with how danger should be calculated and ultimately decided to keep it very simple. Since a long time ago I implemented spotting enemy pawns, I decided that danger was just 100 minus the distance to the closest spotted enemy, clamped between 0 and 100. So if the enemy is 20 meters away, the pawn would feel 80 out of 100 danger. I can always make it more complicated later, but this works for now. Updating the danger value is really easy. In the new Updates Danger behavior, I search through all the spotted enemies to find the closest. Once the closest enemy is found, I subtract its distance from 100 and store that as the danger value. To make things a little more realistic, I took a page from RimWorld and added the concept of a target. The idea is that the target is what the pawn should be feeling, and the value is what the pawn is actually feeling. Now, why would I do this? Well, if you see an enemy, you might feel a certain amount of danger. But when you don't see that enemy anymore, you probably won't relax immediately. It'll take some time. This approach allows me to simulate emotional swings over time. So what this means in code is when a new enemy is spotted, its danger score is calculated. If that score is less than the current target, then there's nothing to do. But if it's greater than the current target, then both the target and value are set to this new score. Think of this as when the pawn sees an enemy, they immediately feel that danger. In addition to this immediate response, the updates danger behavior will update the target danger score every couple of ticks. As the enemy moves away, the target danger score goes down, or drops to 0 if there are no more enemies in sight. It will also lerp the danger value towards the target gradually. This is the effect of pawns reacting right away to danger, but then gradually relaxing as the threat subsides. Okay, the pawns have danger scores that update dynamically, but once again, these values don't do anything on their own. We need to wire up a behavior that does something with this data. I already had the changes stance behavior, so it was just a matter of modifying that logic. First, it checks for cover like it was doing, and if there is cover, then it matches the stance to the available cover. If there is no cover, though, then it checks the danger value. For any threats with a score greater than 80, the pawn should go prone because that is a significant threat and the pawn needs all the cover it can get. Between 50 and 80 meters, the pawn is wary, so they drop down into a crouch to be a smaller target while they monitor the situation. And finally, if the danger value is less than 50, the pawn will just stand and hang out. And there you have it. By adding just a couple of new data points for the pawns to use and some extra logic, we've given the pawns a whole new dimension of character. It's so much more fun to move my squad around the map now that they duck behind cover and seem to react to their surroundings. It's also fun to jump scare them by making an enemy appear in front of them and watching them all hit the deck. At this point, after 2 full years of development, I have to say I'm very happy with the progress I've made and the things that I've learned. I use these devlogs as a way to force me to stick with one project long enough to learn more about Unity than smaller projects could teach me. That said, now is a good time to reevaluate my plans for the next year and what I want this channel to be. The forward ops codebase has gotten to the point where doing smaller experiments to try out other approaches or proofs of concepts just isn't possible. I have other things I want to learn and techniques I want to refine, and I want to make videos about those things as well. So going forward, I'm going to put the quarterly devlog videos for forward ops on pause. I'm not going to stop working on the game, I'm just going to pare back a little so I can do other things. For instance, I've talked about my composable data structure a lot in these videos, and I've really wanted to try and make it a solid, open source package that others could use and give feedback on. I'd like to work on that and document the process. I also want to produce smaller videos so I can post more often. These over 10-minute devlogs with lots of animations are a ton of work, so going for shorter, more direct, more useful content might make more sense. I could use your help though. Are there any game dev topics that you want to see videos about? Are there things about Unity or software development patterns that I can assist you with? I like to make content that people find useful, so please leave your comments below on what you'd like to see. Alright, that's enough for now. I'm looking forward to changing things up, and I hope you'll join me. Please do subscribe and sign up to be notified of future videos if you're interested. As always, thank you much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one here on Damage Algebra. Take care.